Yuccas from Spain, rhododendrons from Germany, or Dutch hazelnut trees. Flowers and plants arriving at UK ports from the European Union face tougher post-Brexit border checks since April 30th, meaning delays and extra costs for importers. At Provenor Nursery in Swanley, southeast of England, production and biosecurity manager Stuart Tickner inspected the leaf of prunus and stuff like that to ensure they're not diseased. And he and his general manager, Richard McKenna, have checked their flowers and some things like mulberry trees that arrive from Italy, for example. And they are concerned because they're saying we're going to have to pay for the offloading, reloading of the truck. And if a truck is delayed, plants get damaged. An entire damaged shipment risks costing up to £40,000, he says, which could have huge financial ramification for the business. Britain's departure from the European Union has already sprouted issues for the horticultural sector. Plants are perceived by the UK government at high risk of importing disease and pests, says McKenna. It has made importing material much harder, much more expensive, and already a lot longer in time, he says. April 30th saw the introduction of physical checks at UK ports on animal or plant products deemed medium risk, such as cut flowers, as well as high risk, which include plants that go into the ground. The UK government is aiming to eventually inspect every shipment of those high-risk goods. At the moment, jeopardy is very high, was said by Sally Culmore, the technical policy manager at the Horticultural Trades Association. There is little certainty about costs, and McKenna says his company could not survive without importing. If the new costs and new regime prevent us from importing or makes the material so expensive that nobody wants to buy it, then that will have a profound impact on the business. Such concerns are shared by Aaron Gelbart, co-founder and chief executive of Bloom & Wild, a company that delivers flowers through letterboxes. In France, the brand is known as Bergamote. About 20% of flowers sold in the UK are grown in Europe, notably the Netherlands. If there are a lot of flowers that are held up for too long and they end up having to go to waste because they are no longer fresh by the time the checks are finished, then yes, that could result in shortages, warns Gelbart. And he says new costs to companies, they will have up to pay a further £145 in administration fees on each shipment, could see consumers paying more for their flowers. I think this will be an inflationary move, partly because of the cost of the checks per consignment and partly because of the cost of wastage, he says. At Provender, that's a huge new building under construction, which overlooks rows of plants and greenhouses where customers and professional gardeners and landscapers are there. They fear that the building will have its own control point where government inspectors can carry out phytosanitary checks on site, which is a move that the company says will allow it to overcome cost and shortage risks resulting from the tougher rules. We hope to reduce the risk of damaging material. We will hopefully eliminate the delay on trucks, says McKenna, which is still a lot of doubt in the businesses. Plants will be handled by the company's specialized employees, though, but the soon-to-be-finished edifice comes with a cost of £100,000 to build. And currently, sanitary and phytosanitary certificates are compulsory for animal and plant products arriving from the EU that are deemed either medium or high risk. And these includes type of dairy products, meats, flowers, plants, wood, and aquatic animals. Those controls, as I said, were toughened now with border checks at ports, and the British government has postponed such rules on 5 occasions since Brexit, and when it came officially into effect, concerned of their impact on the economy. The latter has struggled in recent years for various reasons, including the COVID pandemic and soaring inflation. By contrast, the 27-nation European Union has already toughened controls on goods arriving from the UK, and many analysts have also blamed Brexit as a reason behind the UK's sluggish growth. The UK government has said that while the new border checks started now, they will be scaled up to full check levels in a sensible and controlled way. The long-term objective is to inspect each shipment of high-risk products and up to 30% of goods classified as medium risk. Ahead of the changes, several professional organizations contacted by a press agency said they expected very low levels of targeted controls at the start. The checks wouldn't impact goods moving from Irish ports to Great Britain, for example. That's because there are different implementation dates for ports on the west coast of Britain, as the infrastructure needed is still not in place there. An announcement on a date for physical checks for those locations will be made shortly, but in order to provide traders time to prepare these checks, the British government has said they will not be introduced before spring of next year. An importer, as I said, will have to pay up to £145 each time it takes delivery of goods arriving at the ports of Dover and Folkestone on England's southeastern coast. This really impacts much more massively upon small and medium-sized businesses. That was said by William Bain, the head of the trade policy at the British Chambers of Commerce, and he told that the AFP. Such companies face paying an extra £300 per shipment of goods when the cost of certificates is adding, according to Bain. The UK government has stated that the country could face total additional costs of £330 million a year on such imports. The main issue is the effect it will have on the price of food and additional administrative burden, noted Nan Jones, the technical policy manager at the British Meat Processors Association. And Bain said companies could look to limit costs by increasing the amount of goods imported at a time, which could affect the freshness and, of course, the variety of offerings. In addition to cost concerns, some sectors worry about disruption to supply chains. We think there could be significant problems in the early days due to the government's lack of time and planning to inform and get businesses up to speed. That was said by the Cold Chain Federation, an industry body for temperature-controlled logistic firms in the UK. We could see shortages and disruption, but the general feeling is that they will try and tough it out in the coming weeks and see what happens in the longer term. Horticultural professionals have expressed concern about damage to their flowers, as I started the video with, and their plans during the border inspections. And in Ireland, businesses that are importing goods from continental Europe via the British land bridge might find that they are subject to inspection and any related delays. But at least so far, major disruption to supply chains in and out of Ireland is not anticipated. Imports for personal consumption are not subject to the new checks. Tourists, for example, can return across the English Channel with French cheeses and Italian meats without facing additional costs. Further details on new rules for what you can and can't bring into the UK for personal consumption will be provided in due course, said the UK government, and we will see. Well, Brexit, this little portmanteau of British exit, signifies the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union in 2020. And this momentous event, driven by a narrow victory for the Leave campaign in a 2016 referendum, sent shockwaves through the political and economic spheres of Europe. The road to Brexit was quite arduous, and the 2016 referendum result ignited a period of intense negotiations between the UK and the EU. And these talks grappled with unwinding decades of economic and legal integration, addressing issues like trade, the rights of EU citizens living in the UK and vice versa, and the UK's financial obligations to the Union. The complexity of these issues, coupled with differing political stances on both sides, led to extensions of the withdrawal deadline. And finally, on January 31st in 2020, the UK formally left the EU. However, a transition period was implemented to ease the immediate disruption. And during this time, the UK remained a subject to many EU rules while negotiations on a new trade deal continued. And this period expired at the end of 2020, marking the UK's full withdrawal from the EU's political and economic structures. The ramifications of Brexit are still being felt today. The UK established a new trade deal with the EU, but it's a far cry from the seamless movement of goods and services that existed before. The long-term economic consequences for both the UK and the EU remain a topic of debate. A particularly contentious issue is the border between Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland, an EU member country. Finding a solution that avoids a hard border while upholding the Good Friday Agreement was a complex challenge with ongoing negotiations and now bringing even more trouble like migrants. But Brexit's legacy is multifaceted, and proponents argue it grants the UK greater control over its laws, borders and trade policy, and opponents highlight potential economic drawbacks and the strain placed on the unity of the United Kingdom, particularly regarding Northern Ireland and Scotland. Undoubtedly, Brexit marks a turning point in European history, signifying the first time a member state has left the European Union. And it serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of international relations, the challenges of unwinding deep integration, and the evolving landscape of European unity. But there were two things that happened. Brexit showed us that it is not a good idea to leave the European Union for economic reasons alone already. And on the other side, brought more unity into the remaining 27 member states of the EU. So if you want to talk about Brexit benefits, it's at least that. And if you want to see more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.